Hate boarding houses, love boarding houses. What are boarding houses? The A to Z in boarding houses. Stay tuned.
I'm the ringleader, so listen up.
Hey! I'm not calling you Mr. Novak this morning. It's Mr. Miyagi.
Daniel-san.
And why? Because we're turning this now into Sensei Saturdays. And because we're basically going to be deep diving into really interesting topics that I come across in the commercial sector of it all, in the industry. And you're going to be my teacher. You're going to guide me. You're going to sharpen my blade when it comes to these really deep conversations. And, a lot of people like myself, we don't really talk about these things very much. We don't come across them very often, and then when you do, I get intrigued, I get interested. I want to ask you a ton of questions. A bit hard sometimes because we're so fast tracked back and forth doing our own thing. So this is a time,
busy,
the opportunity.
Yep.
So,
and a big topic like this boarding house topic is a bit of a dirty word, bit of a beautiful word, and a lot of people don't know them back to front, inside and out, like we do. So we're going to share the knowledge.
Awesome. So I guess the very basic
question. If I had chopsticks, I'd catch a fly right now.
Well, we're on wax on, wax off this morning, so we're doing a very basic startup to it all. So boarding houses. What are boarding houses? Because I can imagine you've dealt with them quite a long time in your career. And let's get into it from there. Let's start basic.
State government came along with affordable housing and imposed on all councils, you must allow this type of development, irrelevant to your controls in your area that you think you may have. We're gonna allow, and we want to see cluster developments. And so basically they allowed a bucket load of apartments on regular blocks. And the blocks that didn't have unit zoning, they were effectively allowing these unit developments. But they couldn't be sold separately. They were a build-to-rent model. So once you built it, you couldn't sell them one by one. You had to rent them all out and hold. Or if you wanted to sell, you have to sell the whole thing.
The whole thing. Interesting. Okay, so then some questions really span from that I've asked you just then. So what's the average build? Like how many, for instance, would you say these micro homes in a block? What's the sizes that we typically range? And then I guess the big question is like who, if this is a rent model, then who manages them? What do investors and developers do in that case?
So there's some new controls coming through which says it has to be managed by like Link Housing or a housing provider, government housing provider. But the majority, like 95% of the ones that you see, are managed by real estate agencies. And these sizes are about 30 odd meters squared. So they're basically they're big studio apartments. They're not 1 and 2 bedrooms. They're big studio apartments.
Interesting. And I take it then, being big studio apartments like that, I'm assuming you're attracting students, like that would be the major pool. People, I take it as well, short-term leases, really? They're not something necessarily long-term. Is that right?
They've got to, they can't be too short. They have to be in excess of 3 months. So generally they're 6 to 12 month leases. People used to freak having these buildings next to them purely because of the bulk, the size, and the type of people that were going to be renting that. They were worried that. So the reason why government introduced it is because they wanted key workers, low-income earners to rent these sort of products. And there wasn't, generally they were forced to get a 1-bedroom unit, which started for $500 a week, say. So they were realising that in a lot of areas, people just couldn't rent, and they were forced out of that area. So the boarding house introduction allowed rents coming in at 390, 370 a week, up to 450, 470 a week. So for some spunky ones, and it was just a really nice product. The take up from us in the Northern Beaches was key workers, nurses, even sometimes doctors that are on shift work. They needed a second residence. Couples that both working at Woolies, just working really hard, sending money back overseas, but they don't really want to spend too much on rent. Divorcees, because trial separations, they didn't want to go out and buy furniture and go through all that stuff. They just wanted to move into something. So boarding houses are generally furnished.
Interesting. So there's definitely a sense of affordability there for something like this. Let's break down a boarding house as well. So it's definitely common areas in the build. Do most of these come with parking as well for occupants? And what are some of the key features, I'd say, with a boarding house that you've seen?
Look, for a tenant, a key feature is it's cheap. There's not much upfront cost because it's furnished. So there's a bed, there's a television, there's a dining table, there's a lounge already. It can be sort of relatively short term, so you can be in and out in 6 months. With a lot of these, the reality is people stay longer. But sometimes you just want something. You think you want something for shorter, or you want something for shorter. Other key features are there is a breakout area, like a common area that they have for sometimes meal preparation. But generally, most of these have a kitchenette and a laundry and a bathroom within the apartment. But and I think that's also nice, like-minded people. So a lot of the people that are in that building are on a mission, want to save some money, affordable workers, so they sort of have that in common. But to answer your parking, generally you pay an extra $25, $35 for the parking. It's generally not included.
Okay. Now, then, why is something like the construction of a boarding house so enticing or appealing to a developer and an investor? What is it that draws them in to want to do something like this?
Look, I think it's lent itself to a lot are in sort of private family offices, high wealth families. They're not getting that return on their money, and they want to get a better return on their money. So at the moment, banks are returning less than 1% if you've got cash in the bank. So a lot of investors, rather than going out and buying 12 units, they will just buy something like this. It's got this return already. It rents no problems already. You get your tax depreciation, a good tax depreciation return on it. It's just a real nice, tidy style of development. And sometimes, if you just spend that money on commercial, you've got one tenant, and if that tenant moves out, you're in trouble. So it's a bit more bankable for investors.
Interesting.
For some investors in that asset class.
Now, it looks as if, as of last year, there was this thing of a new generation boarding houses, and there was a ton of DAs that were being submitted across Sydney, and a lot of people wanting to get in and explore this. Where do you more or less forecast that to happen along in the Northern Beaches, for instance?
Okay, guys, this is a live show, so if you've got any questions, ask along the way or direct message us and we can help you. Look, boarding houses, they've changed over the last 7-8 years that they've been around since state government introduced them. They've become harder to build. So now, for instance, that the government about 3 or 4 years ago, the government clamped down. There was almost a circumstance where you didn't have to do much parking or any parking at all, depending on where you were. It got to a stage where they had parking allocations of, it was something like 5 to 1. So for every 5 apartments, you only needed 1 car space. The government got really, really clamped down on that even further. So you needed much more car spaces. So that made a lot of blocks developable suddenly undevelopable because they couldn't provide for those car spaces given the configuration size of the block or configuration of the block. So that's made it really hard for developers to get these approved. Now the latest change is doesn't matter. The government doesn't care how big your block is. They're going to allow only 12 per block. So that put a rocket through a massive amount of boarding house approvals in the last couple of years. So you're generally not going to see big boarding houses approved at all any longer in sort of Sydney, New South Wales, unfortunately.
Interesting. So more or less, it's a rare opportunity if you do come across something like that. And I think it's something that I've seen as of recent times. I mean, look, I dive deep into my whole commercial and sales element, more so in the leasing capacity here at the agency. But it's really interesting when I see something like what yourself and James have got up on the market at the moment, French's Forest, the last of its kind, as we say, of DAs that's been approved, 55 units that can be built. Incredible opportunity. I think this is where the topic spans for me to talk with you about it, because you see something like that and you wonder and you get curious, and there's a ton of questions that come with it, but such an incredible opportunity for someone to take on. 55 apartments, French's Forest, unbelievable.
Yeah, so we've got for sale in French's Forest I call it Godzilla, the rental monster. We've got if some clever person's going to come in, they're going to spend for 55 apartments. They're going to spend. They're going to buy a block of land that they can build 55 apartments. They're going to spend $8 million. I'd imagine, I don't know building costs, but I'm hearing thrown around from builders circa $8 million to build that. So for $16 million, you're going to get 55 apartments. The rental that's going to generate is probably going to be around that $1.4 million per year. That's an incredible return on your money. So it comes in about 8.5% return on your money, not including tax depreciation. That's massive. That's massive. And once it's rented and you've got all that, you've built it and you've got all those tenants there, this sort of development sells for a 4.8% return, which then means that it's probably going to be worth circa $5 million. So it's cost you 16, it's worth $5 million. You've made some serious money by building.
Serious money. That's unbelievable. And it looks like it's going to be a beautiful build when put together, and an incredible addition to French's Forest. Again, it's one of those Saturdays where I feel like you filled my head with all this knowledge, all this stuff. I've got to do something with it. Boarding houses. Mr. Miyagi.
It's a nice model. And you know what? A lot of neighbours were really upset about these guys being built next to them. But the reality is these neighbours that are hung around, stayed there, let the development get built, let the development get rented, they're actually pretty quiet people to themselves. You know, they're not big rooms, so it's not like they're having 10 people over for a party. Very private people, very to themselves. So the reality of boarding houses has actually been very good for Sydney, Australia, and it generally and genuinely has brought affordable accommodation into some suburbs where you just couldn't rent anything for that amount of money. So they've been good.
That's fantastic. At least they've moved away from that stigma that was somewhat created in more so the earlier days when boarding houses were introduced. Like you've just elaborated there, you know, you've got quiet, respectable residents that come in, you know, minding their own business, doing their thing, and it's a great addition again to the suburbs that they're in. It's fantastic. Wow. And
people didn't know what they were. So when they heard the word boarding house, it was like, a boarding house, like it's an old-fashioned word, and they're like, that is like shit. But the reality is that they were new generation. They were spunky new accommodation, compact, and the type of people that came there wasn't riffraff. So the reality has been very cool.
I like it. Well, I think again, you've done it to my brain, Mr. Miyagi, and I'm actually really, you've done these ones to me. You've got these cogs turning. I love it. It was definitely a wax on, wax off moment. I'm keen to learn more. Every Saturday we're going to be doing this, guys. Sensei Saturdays. If you've ever
Sensei
got
Saturdays.
Sensei Saturday's got topics that you want us to deep dive into, you know, I love, you know, being one that doesn't know it all and wants to continue learning. And when I've got someone like my sensei here that's willing to give me the goods, I'm going to take advantage.
Awesome. Hope we taught someone out there, people out there, stuff about boarding houses as well. They're not that bad. You're not going to see many more of them now because they're limited to 12 unless they're already approved. So, yeah, keep an eye out for them. Good investment.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Miyagi,
Thanks, Legend. Thanks, Bedroom Eyes. See ya. Bye.
See you guys.